Messes take time to clean up, and I fear this one's going to need a little more time.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you for hanging out with me on today's episode. We are going to talk all about free agency. It has kicked off, and the Flames have done kind of what a lot of us expected because they had $2.5 million. Not a lot to work with, and we have to talk about Craig Conroy and the possible next moves. What are the next steps for the Flames, and how does losing Matthew Phillips, how does that affect the rest of the organization? But today, thank you for hanging out with us, and we are going to dive right in. And before we do that, make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts. We are free 99 on YouTube and every podcast platform. So Saturday was the start of free agency. 12:01. We know that's when it's supposed to start, like the negotiations are supposed to start, and that's when people are supposed to start calling, but somehow all the deals kind of roll in between 12 and 1. These like the bigger ones for the most part. And we saw quite a few. Milan Lucic went back to Boston and said that he had been thinking about that moment for the last 7 years. So, it's good to see him head back east and, where he considers home. So I hope he has a good rest of his career there. Signed a 1-year deal worth $1 million. Trevor Lewis is also headed back to his home team, I guess, where we got him from, the Los Angeles Kings. And that is so exciting because I think he spent all of his career there up until signing with Calgary. So it's exciting for, to go back to what you know. And another returning face is Troy Stetcher back to Arizona. I thought that Stetcher would have signed with Calgary. I really did. It sounded like he was interested in staying, and I don't know if Conroy and the front office were kind of like, no, we have to go a cheaper route. You also want to compete, so you can't just have AHL level guys on your roster and employed for you, right? You have to have people that can defend, and I really thought that he would have been one to stay just because I found him to be effective. I found him to be someone that, again, wasn't super expensive, that could get the job done, and he's a body. That is just kind of how you have to look at it sometimes. He was there on the ice. He did his job. Takes up one of the 50 roster spots. So simple as that, right? But what is very exciting here is the fact that your fourth line is gone. Nick Ritchie is gone. Milan Lucic is gone. And Trevor Lewis is gone. So you just opened up pretty much 3 spots for your next guys. I think that this is the time for them to really step into and lean into the youth movement. We know that they've said that they are, looking to play more of the younger guys, and this team is going to get younger. But we need to see some action behind these words, because I feel like we were sold kind of like this big dream in April and then again in May. And it just kind of in June when they hired the coach, but it kind of feels like it's falling flat. Craig Conroy has a job to do. He can't fix everything overnight, but I truly would have expected something to be done by now, and not just a Tyler Toffoli trade. I think, whether it be a Hanifin trade or a Lindholm extension or trading him or re-signing Backlund, I really expected something, and I think a lot of us did, especially because you need some cap space. So you have to get creative. And I don't know how many times I can say that, but silver lining here, there are going to be new bodies out on the ice, and they'll be eating those 10 to 12 minutes a night and learning and developing with the Calgary Flames. And I think that this is something that so many of us have been wanting for so long. We have wanted younger guys to crack this roster and to finally break out of the AHL. And I remember Daryl Sutter said last season, when he was asked why he wasn't playing Phillips and Pelletier, and he said those guys aren't fourth line guys. They don't have to be fourth line guys. It's about them getting like the minutes and the reps and learning at the NHL level. But I'm not a coach. I just play one on this podcast. And I find it very interesting that Matthew Phillips did walk. And we're going to talk more about that next, because I feel like that kind of sets the tone for how the future goes when it comes to younger guys in the organization that have a decision to make. But before we do that, I do want to take a quick break here and talk to you about FanDuel, because FanDuel is the number one sports book in America. And take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That is up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run. All on an app that is safe, secure, easy to use, and when you win, you can get paid instantly. And that's like one of my favorite things about the app, because sometimes I hit it, I need my money. I need to walk away, right? That's when you're responsible. And there's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. And thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out with me today on today's episode of Locked On Flames. We are just living for the hope of it all, really. We just got to keep hoping that someone makes a move. You know, I thought that the Tyler Toffoli trade was going to kind of be like the first domino here and in pre-draft trades, but it obviously didn't turn out like that. But instead, the Flames lost someone that I would consider an integral part of their AHL team, and that's Matthew Phillips. Matthew Phillips was the two-time leading scorer in the AHL. I know he was awarded it once. I can't remember if it happened the second time, but he was able to produce. He was able to consistently produce and be one of those guys that you kind of hope sticks around and you call up when you need him and he's ready to crack the roster. And it just never happened. I said on Friday, when kind of running down the Flames priorities, I said re-signing him was high on my list, if not number one, because you want this team to get younger, you want this team to get faster, you want this team to get better. Adding an offensive presence like Matthew Phillips was probably part of that solution, but he is following Mitch Love to the Washington Capitals, and I'm sure he will see playing time. You know, it may start off as a bottom six role, but again, you have to get those consistent reps in before you can just jump to that top line. Like in no world are like any of these guys coming in and jumping to the top line. Like unless you're like a Shane Wright or something like that. Like there's just not a situation where anyone in the Flames roster is doing that. So, or Flames organization rather, sorry. But he just never got the chance in Calgary, and it is so frustrating. Sutter made it nearly impossible. And I think that it's fine to get a player, acclimated with the pros and what day-to-day life looks like and how you kind of have to go from like a boy to a man with your, maturity level, your responsibility, and your own accountability, because you're not with the 18, 19, 20, early young kids. You're with guys that could potentially like be your dad's age, depending on how old you are. But it is something that is so unfortunate, and something that is going to drive me bonkers when I see him scoring consistently in Washington, because that could have been in Calgary. And because of the toxicity and the stubbornness in the organization, it just did not happen. He was up for 11 games and played, I think, 1 or 2, but barely saw any ice time. He did not get the chance. And I would want a fresh start too. Are you kidding me? I would feel scorned almost, because you don't believe in me. No one is going to go to bat for me over the coach and say, hey, this kid is doing fantastic things in the AHL. You are watching these games. Why aren't you utilizing him the way that this team needs? They needed speed. They needed offense. And Matthew Phillips and Jacob Pelletier were right there. And that did not happen. How many of you have left jobs that maybe underappreciated you? You did a lot of work, but you didn't get the pay that kind of went along with the work. You didn't, you just had a nasty boss. There were a lot of mean girls in the office, things like that. Like sometimes a fresh start in a new environment can do wonders. And I think that if Phillips is going to make that jump to the NHL, he needs to see consistent NHL playing time, and he is going to get that in Washington. You may not get that in Calgary. You should going into this season, but that was something he probably didn't want to wait on. And I don't think anyone can blame him. Things did not go well for him here in terms of, his development went great, but it's about jumping and climbing that ladder. He was ready for the NHL this past season, and it is just an absolute shame that Dino Daryl ruined it for him. And I'm sure that he beat himself up over it. I'm sure that, when one of the greatest coaches of all times isn't playing you, I'm sure that takes a toll on like your psyche, and you start doubting yourself. It's just, it stinks. It really does all around, because you're losing a good player, and I'm sure things weren't great for him at some points. He gave everything. And what did he get in return? Okay, a 2-year offer. But I think that's fine. A 1-year deal in Washington, getting his first season with Mitch Love at an NHL level is probably going to be really exciting for him. And I think learning from some of those guys in Washington is going to be huge. There's no one that most of these guys wouldn't want to learn from, other than like Ovechkin, Crosby, and McDavid. I think, okay, maybe Patrick Kane, because a lot of them said that at the draft. But I think so many of them like grew up watching Ovi. So to learn from someone that is as dominant as him that's exciting. And players are entitled to this. You hit unrestricted free agency, you get to decide your next step in your future. And I wish nothing but the best for him. I hope that he does have a successful transition to the NHL. And everyone that's doubted him because of his size or because of whatever it may be, I hope they eat crow. It's as simple as that. I don't know what this means for the future. Pelletier is an RFA next season, so they're kind of lucky there that he's not just going to walk. If he's going to walk, it's going to be a trade with his rights. But they really have to do this right. I don't think they're in a position to really lose any more young guys that they have developed that have made a difference at the AHL level. They got to the Western Conference Finals for a reason. And next season with Pelts, I think it's truly going to depend on how this season goes. And he's going to reach restricted free agency, but he still has options. He still has options, and it's not, Matthew Tkachuk was an RFA, and look what he did. Granted, I understand two very different players, but both of them, you can dictate your future as an RFA. So coming up next, we are going to wrap up the show with predictions and just cleaning up this mess, because someone has to do it. And thank you so much for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Leave a nice little review and a 5-star rating on Apple. It's free, helps us, means a lot. So just do it. Speaking of just do it, can we rip the Band-Aid off and start these trades? Tyler Toffoli trade, and then the next domino to fall was Matthew Phillips leaving, and then signing a bunch of people that are just there to fill out your AHL roster. And then there's one veteran defenseman that is just coming from Detroit, just played 2 years there. So, woohoo. I don't think anyone expected monumental moves to be made yesterday. The Flames were not in a position to make any sort of franchise-altering moves. We did enough of that last summer. So if we can have 5 minutes to breathe, even if it's just the off season and y'all want to continue this chaos in the fall, that's fine. But just the summer, let's keep it low key. Maybe just do some trades, the ones that we're expecting, and then we can talk. But yesterday, or I guess Saturday, when free agency opened, obviously there were players on the move, and a lot of goaltenders kind of filled roles that that Dan Vladar could have filled. And I think that's kind of the safe way to go in free agency for general managers, unless there is some sort of it has to be an unprecedented thing for them to want to trade for a goalie when the goalie market for free agency is okay. So, Jonathan Quick went to the Rangers, more than likely to finish out his career. David Riddick and Cam Talbot are they're back together in Los Angeles, which is kind of, funny considering, they were teammates in Calgary together. And Joonas Korpisalo signed a multi-year, a 5-year deal in, I believe it's Ottawa. And I don't like giving goalies term like that, because look at Jordan Binnington and how well that has aged. Just saying. But I do think that you can still move him. It's just not going to be, high up on the list, depending on, if Markstrom was battling an injury. Is he coming back fully healthy? Is Dustin Wolf ready to play 30 games? Is he? I don't know. I would say so, yes. But again, the AHL is just a different, or the NHL is a different beast than the AHL. So you got to think about that too, right? You don't want to rush someone's development to the point where you break them by 24. You need a goalie. Dustin Wolf is the next goaltender of the Calgary Flames. He is your man. So take care of him and make sure he has that successful transition. Doesn't have to be smooth. There can be bumps in the road, but it should not be, oh my God, I should have worn a seatbelt bump in the road where I'm flying all over the place, right? You know what I'm saying? But Anthony Duclair was also traded from Florida to the San Jose Sharks, and I was shocked. shocked. I really thought that the Flames were going to be more aggressive in pursuing him because they want to see Huberdeau succeed. And yes, they talk about wanting to get younger, but you gotta have some like established pieces here to that play well together, that have chemistry. You can't just kind of wing it. That's not how you're not necessarily going to get success that way. And with no updates on Lindholm's front, are you kind of stuck because you don't know if you're going to be committing $8.5 million or if you're going to kind of have that extra, what is it? I think it's like 4.25 for next season because you are trading him. It's just, you have to figure it out. And no, Hanifin is still on the roster. Kind of figured he would have, I've said this a million times, but I thought he would have been moved ahead of the draft or at least like during the draft. But obviously that didn't happen. And I think it's very easy to get discouraged when you are looking at this and saying, they've promised us a whole lot, but are doing a whole lot of nothing. And that's fair. I get it. I am honestly kind of disappointed too. Again, they weren't going to make any sort of splash in free agency. It was going to be like a pebble, like hitting the water and like a few rings, that kind of splash compared to like Columbus signing Johnny Gaudreau last summer, right? But Craig Conroy has a lot to clean up, and he has to get everyone aligned. He has to listen to a lot of different people and get everyone on the same page. And yes, while it is about roster management as well, it is about making sure that your staff is also ready and all on the same page as well. So you have to be patient with this stuff. Elias Lindholm should have an answer by now. Like I would say that this is kind of clock is ticking, but I feel like he kind of holds the ball. The ball's in his court, so he can do what he wants. And until then, the Flames have to keep moving. They can't stand still. So if they are not going to move Elias Lindholm, you have to be working on moving Hanifin. Are you moving Vladar? Great. So why don't you do that? And I am getting tweet notifications from Elliot Friedman, so maybe this is something with the Flames. It is not, but it's fine. So hopefully by the end of the week we have something. I hope that the Flames can just do the roster turnover thing now because we're tired. We're tired. We don't know what the roster is going to look like. You don't know what the roster is going to look like. So let's get to it. I think the next piece to go is Hanifin. I think that Backlund could be like the dark horse, I guess, in this, but if I had to put money on it, like if FanDuel had a prop, I would put a decent amount of money, more than $5, but like less than 20 on Noah Hanifin being moved next. And I think that's what we should be looking for. And I'm sure Craig Conroy is going to use the start of free agency to kind of see what the market looks like. A lot of these teams didn't want to commit to term. So you gotta think about it from all angles. What are the teams going to do? Do they want a guy that's just a rental? Do they want someone that will commit long term? Are they willing to commit long term? Like we just saw Tyler Bertuzzi asking for 5 years. No one was going to give him that, so he settled for a 1 year in Toronto. You have to make compromises, and I don't know if like 5-1 is really like a good compromise, but maybe you settle at 2. Again, I don't negotiate. That's Brad Treliving's job in Toronto, and good luck to everyone out there because this is a lot. Again, Craig Conroy has a mess to clean up, and he had $2.5 million to work with, and I don't know how much is left, probably not much, but it is now all about moving those big pieces that we've talked about moving since like April or May, late April, early May. And we stop putting it off. You know, you gotta do what you can. And it just doesn't feel like that's happening. But that will do it for today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and I hope everyone had a good holiday weekend, whether you were celebrating Canada Day or the 4th of July a little early. Hope you were safe. Hope you were responsible. Hope you wore some sunblock. And thanks for hanging out. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, on YouTube, we are free 99 on every platform. And it is free 99 to leave a little review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. So I will see you all tomorrow.